Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video, I'm going to do a comparison between the Laphroaig 16-year-old and the Ardbeg 19-year-old Traigh Bhan. This is batch 1. So I recently did a review of the Laphroaig 16-year-old, and I was really impressed with it. But as I was smelling and tasting the whiskey, I thought to myself, what other whiskey could this be compared to? What is its closest competitor? What, in a blind taste test, might it be confused with? And immediately it came to my mind, in fact, I commented in the video, that in some ways it reminded me of an Ardbeg. There is a certain characteristic that is distinctive of Ardbeg. Don't know how quite to describe it. Something Ardbegian that I don't find necessarily in the Laphroaig 16 yet. A lot of its characteristics seem a little bit more like an Ardbeg than a Laphroaig. So then I thought that, well, wee beastie, you'd be way too young. Ardbeg 10, maybe, but I think in terms of the age differences between the Lagavulin 16 and the 10-year-old would show up. Obviously, the Uigeadail is a higher ABV and has sherry cask in it. Corryvreckan has a French oak character, again, higher ABV. And obviously, PX cask. Then I thought, you know what? Actually, it might be an Ardbeg 19-year-old, a Traigh Bhan. Now, this is batch 1. I don't have any other batches. I think the latest batch is batch 4, and these are really expensive. But I thought, you know what, in terms of the quality of the whiskey, general profile, mouthfeel, ABV, the way they even look, I think its closest competitor is actually the Traigh Bhan, the 19-year-old. So I'm going to be comparing it with batch number 1. But before I get into this, let me tell you a little bit about these whiskeys. The Laphroaig 16-year-old was aged for 16 years in ex-bourbon cask. The Ardbeg 19-year-old was aged in ex-bourbon cask and spent a little bit of time in a sherry cask. Both of these are non-chill filtered, have natural color. The Laphroaig 16-year-old is bottled at 48% alcohol by volume. The Ardbeg 19 at 46.2% alcohol by volume, so they're not too far apart. However, this is the biggest difference. The Laphroaig 16 is $138, give or take, and the Ardbeg 19 is $330 at its current price. When batch number 1 came out, I don't think I paid over $300, but if you're gonna buy a Traigh Bhan these days, yeah, they're $300 and up. And the batch 1, because it's such a limited release, they're now going for even more than that. Well, first, let's compare the visual component of these whiskeys. I don't know how well you can pick these up on the camera, but these are practically identical. Both are a light, pale, golden color. The Ardbeg 19-year-old doesn't have that slight green tinge that the 10-year-old does because it has just a touch, probably just a touch of sherry cask in it. But the Laphroaig looks pretty much the same. Actually has some nice viscosity to it. On the Laphroaig, slow forming tears, and pretty much the same with the Ardbeg. Visually, they look the same. They're both non-chill, no added coloring, as you saw there in the notes. So they could easily, if you weren't careful, mix these two glasses up and you wouldn't know which one was which. Let's start with the Ardbeg. On the nose, there is this component to Ardbeg. Maybe it's the purifier that they use, which in the Ardbeg Heavy Vapors, apparently they didn't use for its exalted balance, which is why I didn't really like that one. There's a certain characteristic that is distinctive to Ardbeg. It is a distinctiveness of their peat that distinguishes it from its neighbors, and it's hard to define. There isn't an ashiness, there isn't a medicinal note, there is smoke, peat, hence a little bit of a barbecue character. The fruit characters, typical Ardbeg, lemon and lime, just a touch of saltiness, a little bit of vanilla and spice. This is really approachable on the nose. Even though at this ABV, you would think you might get a little bit of sting or something like that, but it's not. It's really, really approachable. The Laphroaig 16-year-old. So the Laphroaig 16, even though I just recently recorded the video of my review of this, certain characteristics of a whiskey will become more prominent or more noticeable when you compare it to something else. This is one of the values of comparing whiskey, that it's by contrast that certain characteristics of the Ardbeg or of Laphroaig will become much more noticeable because you don't find it in the other whiskey. The smoke character is a little ashier than Ardbeg, but it's not a huge factor. Like the Ardbeg, there's a lemon and lime character. I'm getting more vanilla. Wow. Maybe it's just that minuscule amount of sherry that is in the Ardbeg 19-year-old. But there is sort of a clay character that is typical of Ardbeg that I don't find in Laphroaig. What is more typical of Laphroaig, again, this is just a matter of degrees, not an absolute. You typically get more medicinal, more iodine, and more of an abrasive or assertive would be a better term, peat character, but not in this case. And that's why the Laphroaig 16-year-old seems so much unlike your typical Laphroaig whiskey. Now, if you've had experience with a lot of Laphroaigs that are 20 years and older, like Top Dustin, Top Shelf Dustin, I know he likes to drink a lot of older whiskeys, so he's probably saying, yeah, probably the Laphroaig 32-year-old or something. But other than Top Shelf Dustin, the rest of us, we're not drinking those older whiskeys, at least not on a regular basis. All right. They are very, 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 very similar. You ever meet identical twins that as they get older, yeah, they're identical, but there's these minor differences? Maybe one's slightly taller, maybe one has a few more freckles, maybe the one cuts their hair a little bit differently, but you can still go, yeah, they're twins. You can tell they're twins. Even though, they're these, through time, they have these distinguishing characteristics. Maybe one's put on a few more pounds, whatever. At this point, that's sort of where these are going. It's as if they're twins that only have, identical twins that only have minor differences. But, of course, now we need to go into the most important part, which is the palate. We'll start with the Ardbeg. Fruit-wise, lime comes through much more prominently than lemon on the Ardbeg 19-year-old than it does in, say, the Ardbeg 10. In my review of the Ardbeg 19-year-old Traigh Bhan, which I did quite some time back, I thought that the Ardbeg 19-year-old seems like a more refined and more mature and more developed 10-year-old. Similar characteristics, but this is an example of what that same whiskey, if it was just allowed to mature some more, would be like. It's silky on the palate. It has nice weight to it. It is a nice velvety feel. The smoke is really well interwoven with the rest of the whiskey. Slight saltiness on the back end. In the mid palate, there's a little bit of a nuttiness, a little bit of stone fruit, dried stone fruit, apricot, peach, a little bit of apple, and that little bit of that nuttiness, I think, is coming from just a little bit of a sherry cask influence. All right, let's try the Laphroaig 16-year-old. So I had a little bit of water to help cleanse the palate a little bit. Water can help, but there's still, I mean, it's peat, right? It saturates your palate. It still lingers around. So as much as possible, try to mitigate that by having a little bit of water, but I can still pick up just a hint of the Ardbeg on my palate. All right. The intensity of the peat and smoke is pretty similar. The Laphroaig 16-year-old both have a lemon and lime character. I'm going to say the Ardbeg is a little bit more on the lime. Laphroaig's a little bit more on the lemon. That Laphroaig does not have that sort of distinctive Ardbeg clay earthy character. The only thing I can liken it to is if you've ever had like wet clay and you put it on, on a spinning wheel and you mold it into a vase or whatever. You maybe took a pottery class in school or something like that, and you can kind of smell it. Or if you ever had your vehicle stuck in mud, and you're spinning the wheels and trying to get your vehicle out of the mud, and you get the smell of the mud. Ardbeg has a little bit of that, and I don't get that in the Laphroaig. The Laphroaig, in that sense, is a little cleaner, is a more refined in one sense. But we're talking minuscule difference. These aren't like a huge difference. These are differences which you have to really be paying attention and focused and analyzing it. If you were drinking the Ardbeg, you had it sitting there, and you got up and someone switched your glass with a Laphroaig and you sat back down and you continued drinking, possibility you wouldn't notice. There's a possibility you might not notice, or I might notice that someone has switched glasses and switched my Ardbeg for a Laphroaig because they're that close. They're that close. Particularly after you've had a few sips, and your palate's saturated, because you'd still be tasting a little bit of what you had lingering from the previous sips. But let's continue on with the Laphroaig. Laphroaig seems not only more refined, I'm talking just a hint younger, a hint fresher, much more of a fresh fruit. Both have a fairly lengthy finish. Both have comparable levels of intensity of peat. Both have a slight saline note. Both are fairly sweet, although let me check the Ardbeg again. Both are moderately sweet, and they don't go dry or bitter on the back end. Both moderately sweet all the way through. These are both absolutely fantastic whiskey. Both I would give over 90 points. We can argue about, and point scorers aren't like, measuring with a Geiger counter or something like putting on an actual physical scale. There's a subjective element to it, obviously. These are both, I would say both of these are over 90 points. These are both fantastic whiskeys and comparable in quality. Both of these 93 to 95 points, anywhere in that range. These are both absolutely fantastic whiskeys. Which do I prefer? By just a hair margin, just a wee tad. I prefer the Ardbeg 19-year-old because that distinctive Ardbeg character to it that I love about Ardbeg. It's what makes me love Ardbeg. But in terms of reaching into your pockets and shelling out the money for it, I'd say nope. Laphroaig 16-year-old, easy. Because I can probably get at least I can get two of these for the price of one of these. I can get two Laphroaig 16-year-olds for the price of this one. Ardbeg 19, even if it's the current edition, the most recent batch, which wouldn't cost you as much as to go back and buy a batch one. It's a much better buy. Alrighty. That's it for this video. If you have not yet subscribed, would you like to watch my videos, and ask you to subscribe, ring the bell to be notified for when I go live or post a new video. And again, I want to say, don't feel like shelling out 300 plus whatever on a Ardbeg 19-year-old Traigh Bhan, and you see a Laphroaig 16-year-old, I highly recommend buying a bottle. In fact, maybe buy two. And be happy in the fact that, hey, look, you got something for half as much as it would cost you to get the Ardbeg Traigh Bhan. Nothing against Traigh Bhan. Absolutely love it. Fantastic whiskey. But bang for the buck, Laphroaig 16-year-old every day. All right, till next time, slàinte. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.